I personally had a chance to look over the information that you guys sent me with the work that you did, and I really appreciate you guys sending that to me ahead of time. I found it fascinating. I don't know which one of you wants to spearhead it, but talk to us about what you guys have been doing with monitoring the waterfowl with drones and the brood abundance.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll take the intro on this because I have a little bit of context to place Grant's study into. So, um, waterfowl or duck populations are driven by productivity. So, how many of them hatch and succeed to fledging in a given year? I mean, it's really, the our hunting regulations are such that we don't think that those are particularly important for most duck populations in most contexts. And so, the research focus has always been on breeding grounds productivity. And historically, we've focused on nest success because there's a diversity of predators, skunks and raccoons and foxes and badgers and things and ravens that eat a lot of duck nests. And so, in any given study system, nest success is sort of at the high end, maybe 25%, and at the low end, maybe like 5%, which is not very good odds of pulling off a successful nest. And some of these hens, will re-nest, and so there's a chance for them to try again. But it really is a choke point for waterfowl populations. But, and so we've studied nest success intensively since the late 70s and mid 80s. But nest success is not the fall flight, right? Like those ducklings have to grow up, and it takes them 35 days to become flighted. And so there's a lot of bad things that can happen to ducklings in 35 days. But they're really, really hard to study. If you've ever been on the prairies in spring and summer, like you'll see mama duck maybe, and then she'll dart into the emergent vegetation and hide, and you never see them. In fact, some of my dad's research at the Colorado Division of Wildlife back in the 80s found that it's something like 80% of the time, these mama ducks and ducklings are not visible to researchers who are looking at a pond. And so, like, how do you even monitor this critical life stage that takes you from nest success, hatching out of an egg, to being able to migrate south, right? And so that's sort of been a major a challenge in studying ducks, and one that we've never resolved. We build these fancy population models, and the brood survival bit is basically a black box. I mean, we throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, kind of thing. And so I had a graduate student, Jake Bouchard, who worked for Delta, must have been 5 or 6 years ago. And Delta was at that time pioneering the use of drones equipped with thermal cameras to try to find duck nests. Because looking for duck nests is like relatively inefficient. And so if you can do it with a drone, maybe that's better. And long story short, it worked sort of okay. It turns out that the hot spot that you see on a thermal camera that looks like a nest could be lots of other things, like rocks and cow pies and ant hills. And so you spend a lot of time going out and looking at things that are not actually duck nests. And of course, you're still missing some nests that are really obscured. So they had a graduate student on working on that, and then I took on Jake to do the same thing for overwater nesting ducks. So diving ducks, things like canvasbacks and redheads, will build up their nests on mats of vegetation over the water. And for finding canvasback nests, the drone actually works pretty well because these canvasback nests are sort of at the interior edge of the cattail periphery of a wetland. And they're big open things, and you can really see them with the drone. So like it worked pretty okay for that. And just out of curiosity, Jake's first field season, I was like, hey Jake, can you like pop up the drone in June and just see if we can see any ducklings? Because nobody had ever experimented with this technology before. And like that was a game changer.
What year was that? What year was this?
Yeah, Grant, what year was that? 2018?
Okay. Pre-COVID.
Yeah, definitely pre-COVID. But yeah, so the key to these thermal cameras is that like movement of the objects you're looking for is really critical because the human eye is drawn towards movement, right? And so if you see ducklings moving around in vegetation, like it's a duckling, right? You don't have to wonder about if it's a fence post or a nest. And so that was like sort of mind-blowingly revolutionary that, oh my gosh, all of a sudden this is a way that we could count ducklings, which we've never been able to really do before. And that gets us at a measure of productivity. So if you think about productivity in ducks, we're very good at counting the number of pairs that settle in an area, right? That's how we count ducks on the May breeding survey. But we've never had the back end of productivity. And ducklings are the ultimate metric, right? It integrates how many birds choose to nest, how many eggs they lay, how much their nest success is, right? And so if we can get pair to brood ratios, we can start to evaluate at landscape scale how many ducks we're producing. And that's in reference to habitat, agriculture, predator management, like whatever it is, right? And so that really set off a set of studies out of my lab that try to sort of develop these methods and investigate how these could be used. One of the nuances of this drone-based approach is that to statistically estimate populations, the way we do that is we fly over a wetland once and we determine if we see a duck and her ducklings, and then we fly over again later the same day to see if we see her again or she's hiding. And in that way, we can estimate our probability of detection. And obviously, this is challenging because we have no real way of knowing if it's the same mama hen and her ducklings, right?
Right.
The only way that we can get at that is to make some assumptions. So the historical assumptions are things like, well, we're going to call it the same brood that we saw in the morning if in the afternoon it's the same species on the same pond with the same number of ducklings at the same age class. And if not, then it's not. So the end result of this statistical estimation procedure was that we were estimating our detection probability at something like 50%, which when we're flying drones, like I just legitimately could not believe that they could hide from this thermal camera. And so I felt that our statistical, like the assumptions that we had to make were being violated. Like the broods are moving or there's a duckling that's off somewhere. And so we're really seeing the same brood, but we're just not counting it like the same brood. So the solution, therefore, is to actually mark these hens so we know them as individuals. And that is where Grant's project comes in, is in marking ducks individually, those hens, so we know it's the same brood. So if she moves wetlands, we can go find her and we know that she's still alive and we can still count her ducklings. And so that was really the genesis of Grant's project, was the culmination of a half decade or more of sort of figuring out this technology, figuring out what information we want to gain from it, and sort of what the next steps.
Thank you for watching this clip from the North American Waterfowler podcast. Make sure and subscribe. If you want to see the full episode of this podcast, go to the description where you can click the link. And as always, starting up September, I will be posting all of my waterfowl hunting videos for this coming hunting season.